Welcome to Venture, Observe, and Connect. I'm Deanne Fitzmaurice, and my guest today is my dear friend, Amy Vitale. Amy is a National Geographic photographer, a fellow Nikon ambassador, a documentary filmmaker. She has won most of the important photography awards that exist, but my favorite one is that In Style magazine, I believe it is, nominated you as one of the 50 most badass women. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. That is a fantastic introduction. And I nominate you too. I think you're one of the most incredible badass women out in the world. You
I
show
don't
up
know.
and get things done. You
Oh,
do.
well, that's nice of you, but I think you've got me beat on the badassery scale.
No, I don't agree, but it's so good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so great to have an opportunity to talk with you here. Usually we're just like, ships passing in the night.
Yes,
But we grab our moments whenever we can.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So you're known for your conservation stories, and they always have a beautiful theme of hope. And I'd like you to tell us about some of the work you're doing. Really want to hear about the work you've done with the rhinos, and maybe you could just quickly tell us how you got started and what led you to that work.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I'll try to keep it brief, but basically I started off as a photographer really interested in the human condition and kind of set down this path of covering wars and suffering. And, as I got along maybe 10 years into my career, I started to really make this connection that all of this human suffering was always deeply connected to our environment, to the natural world, that it was in some cases, the loss of basic resources like water, sometimes, climate change and the loss of fertile lands. But usually those things, the breakdown of our ecosystem leads to conflict and suffering. And I realized that in some ways I had been photographing the end of the story and that I really needed to focus on, I seek out answers and solutions. Like, what do we do about this? When you see what's happening, you understand that, this is all self-inflicted in a lot of ways. Like the human beings are doing this to ourselves, and there are solutions. And I think that, you asked about the rhino. This was my great wake up call. Back in 2009, I had this opportunity to meet some of the last Northern White Rhinos that were alive on the planet. And at the time, there were only 8 known to be alive. They were all in zoos. And I heard about this audacious plan to fly 4 of them from the zoo in the Czech Republic, the Králové Zoo, all the way to Kenya in this last ditch effort to save the whole species. And when I set eyes on them for the first time, it just stopped me in my tracks. It just captured my heart. I literally felt like, I mean, I know this sounds crazy and absurd, but I felt like I just set eyes on a unicorn, because you looked at them and they're these gentle, hulking, really ancient creatures. You can recognize when you look at them that they have been on this planet for millions of years, and that something about this, like on that day, there were just 8 known to be alive, kind of, it just impacted me in this really deep way.
Yes. So take us back to the moment. So you're in the zoo in the Czech Republic when you first see this rhino. So take us back there and where it went from there.
Okay. So I met these rhinos. Actually, they had 6 of the last Northern White Rhinos at that time in 2009. And then they decided 4 of them would be sent to Kenya. The thought back then was that the open air, the room, room to roam and fresh air, and it might somehow stimulate them to breed. And then we were hopeful. And years went by. They did not successfully breed. The rhinos were, they began to die. And in 2018, I got a call to hurry back because at that time, Sudan, who was the last male Northern White Rhino, the last, of his kind, was about to die. And I hurried back. And when I got there, I will never forget the scene that I found. It was one of the most heartbreaking moments of my life because, it was just this creature was surrounded by all the people who loved and protected him and committed their lives to him. And if you can imagine, these people spend more time with these rhinos than their own children and their own families. They spend 10 months a year living with these animals. The bonds were deep. They felt like they were their own children. And the thing I remember most was how quiet it was. I mean, normally in nature, you hear the sounds of nature, of birds, of the wind, it was so striking how it felt like on this day, the whole world was mourning the end of the species, because Sudan dying really signaled that this creature was functionally extinct. Because then today there's only 2 female Northern White Rhinos, which means, how are you you can't breed. And so it was this heartbreaking day where all I could hear was the rain and the sobs of the men and women who loved and protected this animal, and just like trying to hold back their tears.
Amy, it's such an incredible photograph. I mean, anybody who looks at that photograph of that moment when Sudan is dying, it's impossible not to feel the emotion. It's so powerfully captured.
And, I just felt like I wasn't just watching an animal die. It felt more personal than that. It actually felt like I was watching humanity's demise, because until we start recognizing that these creatures, we need them as much as, we think they need us. No, we need them for our own survival. We are a part of this landscape, and so are they. And when they die, the whole ecosystem starts to crumble. And I've witnessed that. I've seen how ecosystems fall apart when you take these species out of them. And I realized it's not just the rhinos, it's a whole host of species that we don't even talk about. I've, in my career, really had the opportunity to work with so many charismatic species that get the headlines and the attention. But honestly, I think many of your audience probably knows, but we're going through the 6th mass extinction, which is different from all of these other extinction events in that it's purely human driven. And, I think in the last 14, 15 years, I've been working on these kinds of stories. I've realized actually, it will fill you with despair if you only read those headlines. But if you start to get into each and every single story, there's so much hope. There's so many beautiful people doing incredible things. And I feel like I need to amplify their stories, shine a light on what we can do, and start rewriting those narratives.
I love the way you find the hope. I remember hearing you talk about when you were photographing more of the conflict, the human struggle, when you saw that wedding ceremony in a room tucked away, I think it exemplifies so well how you find hope in a scene that is difficult.
Well, it's all around us. And I mean, even in the worst situations I've been in, it's always when I meet the most extraordinary human beings that remind me, of our resilience, and that we need to pay attention to that too, because that is going to be what saves us all. And so, but the story you're talking about was, I was working in Palestine and Gaza Strip, and like all the journalists there, we were asked to focus on the violence, bring back the most, dramatic images. And on one square block, of kids throwing rocks, which quickly escalated to people dying, I was like one of many photographers, and that's all we chose to photograph, because we thought that that's what our editors wanted. We thought that's what our audience wanted. And this was like this moment. I actually almost died there. And I remember having this wake up call thinking, what am I doing? I'm just bringing back these sensationalistic images to feed, what is probably polarizing more people on the planet than helping. And then as I was walking back to my hotel room, I heard music coming out of this building, and I wander up this, really this dark staircase towards the music. I open the door, and it's this dark room, but there's a light on this beautiful couple, getting married in the middle of all of this chaos and war. And something about it just captured my heart. And I thought, why are we not also sharing these stories, the ones that allow us to relate to one another as simply human beings, seeking out all the same things we all seek out: love, a better life, hope for the future, and to me, as I was sitting there with, just completely captivated by the beauty and resilience of this moment, I just thought, this is the story. This is the story of human resilience. It wasn't the story that my editors asked for or necessarily wanted, but to me, it was the story. And that was the moment that I started to understand that I, as a storyteller, had the power to send back different kinds of stories than they might know about or have asked about. And that's when I started pushing back on what I was being asked to do, and realize that we all have voice, every single one of us. And we also, the narratives that we choose to focus on are probably, something all of us should be paying attention to in today's world. I mean, now more than ever, even the narratives that we choose to feed our minds with, do we only focus on the stories that remind us how disconnected and polarized and how dangerous the world is? Or do we also seek out different kinds of stories that remind us of our shared humanity?
I think it's also important the way you trust your gut. How, you're photographing something and it doesn't feel right. And then you find this hopeful thing, and that just is who you are. That's the way you see the world, and you choose to document that.
Well, I think we are what we feed our minds and heart with. That's what we become. And I realized, I think, being a storyteller, being on the front lines there, knowing what really realities are out there, I realized that I have to seek those things out, because it shapes who we are. Stories create the world we live in. They create who we are as individuals and also the world around us. Stories actually matter.
They do. They do. So I'd like you to tell us how this work that you did has led to this amazing nonprofit that you've founded, Vital Impacts.
Thank you. I thank you for asking. I mean, I do think that it's easy to feel despair and feel like, what can I, one individual, do? The problems are too big. I can't really have an impact. And that is what led me to founding Vital Impacts, which basically brings together a community of amazing photographers, artists, storytellers to use the power of who we are together to raise much needed funding for grassroots conservation, and also to support the photographers themselves. It started off as this little initiative with just my colleague Eileen Mignoni and I, working to bring people together. And in the first 6 months, we raised $1.5 million, which not only went to conservation efforts, but also to humanitarian aid for people caught in the middle of conflicts. It's all connected. It's all the same story. So we've really, grown very quickly. And now we have two $20,000 environmental photography grants and a whole mentoring program for people focused on the natural world, because I think we need more great storytellers that are, shining a light on what's happening to the environment and the solutions. I want to know, what do we do? Because there are solutions, and I think we need to hear more about what those are. And, And so that's kind of the genesis of Vital Impacts. And we believe that art is a powerful on-ramp to activism, in that, art reaches people's hearts and minds very differently than science does. I mean, it's important to know science, but I think that art is a very powerful mechanism to galvanize people and to make people want to become more engaged. And then at the same time, people can own art and, get it to inspire them, and wake up every day and look at this powerful piece of art and remind them of our individual voices matter. We all have a voice and can get out there and do so much more than we often realize.
This organization is so powerful, and what you've done in the first year is so impressive. And I love the way it's working for conservation, it's working for photographers, it's just putting good out into the world. So congratulations on amazing work.
Thank you. But I never fully want to take credit. It's actually, it's a village. It's all of us together, and you're a part of it. So thank you for being a part of it.
So, Amy, do you have any advice to photographers that are trying to find their voice in photography and trying to make a difference with their work like you do?
I do. I mean, it's not that long ago. I remember the struggle is so real. And I would say to people, to be patient, and not to be afraid of discomfort and, struggling. It takes time to get to a place where you start to be able to have that impact. And I think it's really easy to look on social media and see all these people doing amazing things and feel overwhelmed and discouraged. But I would say, if you ask any one of the people you admire doing great work, they will all tell you a very similar story, which is they took a risk. They weren't afraid to fail. So first take that baby step, dip your toe in, and then take the plunge. And, you have nothing to lose, in the sense that, yeah, you may fail. I fail over and over all the time. And it's literally taken me 3 decades to build up what I am doing today. And there was probably a decade of no recognition, continuing to reinvest in myself without many people believing in me and what I could do. I have so many stories of people telling me I didn't belong there, that I couldn't do these things, and just tune those voices out. All the people that tell you you can't do it, it's impossible. Even the story of the Northern White Rhino, I pitched that story around, and every single person I pitched said, no, we're not interested. And you've got to follow your heart a lot of the time, and slow down and understand, it takes patience. And I'm curious, Deanne, what do you think? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, I think there is a lot to not giving up. Perseverance, I think, has got to be the thing, because anything good that I have been able to achieve has happened with a lot of no's in the way. It's just, there are just so many no's along the way. And to just keep pushing through that. Amy, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I know how busy you are, and it's just great. It's so nice to see your face, and I always love listening to your stories. You're just a shining light. So thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Mwah.
Okay. Mwah.